Okay, how's it going, everybody? So we're going to read some more of this, the Russian Social Democratic Party and its immediate task. This is part two. This is, the second earliest writing I got from Stalin here, 1901. Let's go ahead and read the second part. The working class is not the only class that is groaning under the yoke of the Tsarist regime. The heavy fist of the autocracy is also crushing other social classes. Groaning under the yoke are the Russian peasants, wasted from constant starvation, impoverished by the unbearable burden of taxation, and thrown to the mercy of the grasping bourgeois traders and the noble landlords. Groaning under the yoke are the little people in the towns, the minor employees in government and private offices, the minor officials in general, that numerous lower class of the urban population whose existence is as insecure as that of the working class, which has every reason to be disconnected with its social conditions. Groaning under the yoke is that section of the petty bourgeoisie, and even of the middle bourgeoisie, which cannot resign itself to the Tsar's knout and lash. This applies especially to the educated section of the bourgeoisie, the so-called representatives of the liberal professions, teachers, physicians, lawyers, university and high school students. Groaning under the yoke are the oppressed nations and religious communities in Russia, including the Poles, who are being driven from their native land and whose most sacred sentiments are being outraged, and the Finns, whose rights and liberties granted by history the autocracy is arrogantly trampling underfoot. Groaning under the yoke are the eternally persecuted and humiliated Jews who lack even the miserably few rights enjoyed by other Russian subjects. The right to live in any part of the country they choose, the right to attend school, the right to be employed in government service, and so forth. Groaning are the Georgians, Armenians, and other nations who are deprived of the right to have their own schools and be employed in government offices, and are compelled to submit to the shameful and oppressive policy of Russification, so zealously pursued by the autocracy. Groaning are the many millions of Russian nonconformists who wish to believe and worship in accordance with the dictates of their conscience, and not with the wishes of the Orthodox priests. Groaning are, but it is impossible to enumerate all the oppressed, all who are persecuted by the Russian autocracy. They are so numerous that if they were all aware of this, and were aware who their common enemy is, the despotic regime in Russia would not exist another day. Unfortunately, the Russian peasantry is still downtrodden by age-long slavery, poverty, and ignorance. It is only just awakening. It does not yet know who its enemy is. The oppressed nations in Russia cannot even dream of liberating themselves by their own efforts so long as they are opposed not only by the Russian government, but even by the Russian people, who have not yet realized that their common enemy is the autocracy. There remain the working class, the little people among the urban population, and the educated section of the bourgeoisie. But the bourgeoisie of all countries and nations is very skillful in reaping the fruits of another's victory, very skillful in getting others to pull its chestnuts out of the fire. It never wishes to jeopardize its own relatively privileged position in the struggle against the powerful foe, the struggle which as yet is not so easy to win. Although it is discontented, its conditions of life are tolerable, and therefore it gladly yields to the working class and to the common people in general the right to offer their backs to the Cossacks' whips and the soldiers' bullets, the fight at the barricades, and so forth. It sympathizes with the struggle, and at best expresses indignation under its breath at the cruelty with which the brutal enemy is quelling the popular movement. It is afraid of revolutionary action and resorts to revolutionary measures itself only at the last moment of the struggle, when the enemy's impotent is evident. This is what the experience of history teaches us. Only the working class and the people generally, who in the struggle have nothing to lose but their chains, only they constitute a genuine revolutionary force. And Russia's experience, although still meager, confirms this ancient truth taught by the history of all revolutionary movements. Of the representatives of the privileged class, only a section of the students have displayed determination to fight to the end for the satisfaction of their demands. But we must not forget that this section, too, of the students consists of sons of these same oppressed citizens, and that, until they have plunged into the sea of life and have occupied a definite social position, the students, being young intellectuals, are more inclined than any other category to strive for ideals, which call them to fight for freedom. Be that as it may, at the present time, the students are coming out in the social movement, among as leaders, as the vanguard. The discontented sections of different social classes are now rallying around them. At first, the students tried to fight with a weapon borrowed from the workers, the strike, when the government retaliated to their strikes by passing the brutal law, provisional regulations, under which students who went on strike were drafted into the army. The students only had one weapon left: to demand assistance from the Russian public and to pass from strikes to street demonstrations. And that is what the students did. They did not lay down their arms. On the contrary, they fought still more bravely and resolutely. Around them rallied the oppressed citizens. A helping hand was offered them by the working class, and the movement became powerful, a menace to the government. For 2 years already, the government of Russia has been waging a fierce but fruitless struggle against the rebellious citizens, with the aid of its numerous troops, police, and gendarmes. The events of the past few days prove that political demonstrations cannot be defeated. The events in the early days of December in Kharkov, Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, Riga, and other places show that public discontent is now manifesting itself consciously, and that the discontented public is ready to pass from silent protest to revolutionary action. But the demands of the students for freedom of education, for non-interference in internal university life, are too narrow for the broad social movement. To unite all the participants in this movement, a banner is needed, a banner that will be understood and cherished by all, and will combine all demands. Such a banner is one inscribed: overthrow the autocracy. Only on the ruins of the autocracy will it be possible to build a social system that will be based on government by the people and ensure freedom of education, freedom to strike, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom for nationalities, etc. Only such a system will provide the people with means to protect themselves against all oppressors, against the grasping merchants and capitalists, the clergy and the nobility. Only such a system will open a free road to a better future, to the unhindered struggle for the establishment of the socialist system. The students cannot, of course, wage this stupendous struggle by their own efforts alone. Their weak hands cannot hold this heavy banner. To hold this banner, stronger hands are needed. And under the present conditions, this strength lies only in the united forces of the working people. Hence, the working class must take all Russian banner out of the weak hands of the students, and inscribing on it the slogan, "Down with the autocracy, long live a democratic constitution," lead the Russian people to freedom. We must be grateful to the students for the lesson they have taught us. They showed how enormously important political demonstrations are in the revolutionary struggle. Street demonstrations are interesting in that they quickly draw large masses of the people into the movement, acquaint them with our demands at once, and create extensive favorable soil in which we can boldly sow the seeds of socialist ideas and of political freedom. Street demonstrations give rise to street agitation, to the influence of which the backward and timid section of society cannot help yielding. A man has only to go out into the street during a demonstration, to see courageous fighters, to understand what they are fighting for, to hear free voices calling upon everybody to join the struggle, and militant songs denouncing the existing system and exposing our social evils. That is why the government fears street demonstrations more than anything else. That is why it threatens with dire punishment, not only the demonstrators, but also the curious onlookers. In this curiosity of the people lurks the chief danger that threatens the government. The curious onlooker of today will be a demonstrator tomorrow and rally new groups of curious onlookers around himself. And today, there are tens of thousands of such curious onlookers in every large town. Russians no longer run into hiding, as they did before, on hearing of disorders taking place somewhere or other. "I'd better get out of the way in case I get into trouble," they used to say. Today, they flock to the scene of the disorders and evince curiosity. They are eager to know why these disorders are taking place, why so many people offer their backs to the lash of the Cossack's whip. In these circumstances, the curious onlookers cease to listen indifferently to the swish of whips and sabers. The curious onlookers see that the demonstrators have assembled in the streets to express their wishes and demands, and that the government retaliates by beatings and brutal suppression. The curious onlookers no longer run away on hearing the swish of whips. On the contrary, they draw nearer, and the whips can no longer distinguish between the curious onlookers and the rioters. Now conforming to complete democratic equality, the whips play on the backs of all, irrespective of sex, age, and even class. Thereby the whiplash is rendering us a great service, for it is hastening the revolutionization of the curious onlookers. It is being transformed from an instrument for taming into an instrument for rousing the people. Hence, even if street demonstrations do not produce direct results for us, even if the demonstrators are still too weak today to compel the government immediately to yield to the popular demands, the sacrifices we make in street demonstrations today will be compensated 100-fold. Every militant who falls into the struggle or is torn out of our ranks rouses hundreds of new fighters. For the time being, we shall be beaten more than once in the street. The government will continue to emerge victorious from street fighting again and again. but these will be Pyrrhic victories. A few more victories like these, and a defeat of absolutism is inevitable. The victories it achieves today are preparing its defeat, and we, firmly convinced that day will come, that day is not far distant. Risk the lash in order to sow the seeds of political agitation and socialism. The government is no less convinced than we are that street agitation spells its death warrant, that within another 2 or 3 years, the specter of a people's revolution will loom before it. The other day, the government announced through the mouth of the governor Yekaterinslav Gubernera that it will not hesitate to resort to extreme measures to crush the slightest attempt at a street demonstration. As you see, the statement smacks of bullets, and perhaps even of shells, but we think that bullets are no less potent than whips as a means of rousing discontent. We do not think that the government will be able to, even with the aid of such extreme measures, to restrain political agitation for long and hinder its development. We hope that revolutionary social democracy will succeed in adjusting its agitation to the new conditions, which the government will create by resorting to these extreme measures. In any case, social democracy must watch events vigilantly. It must quickly apply the lessons taught by these events and skillfully adjust its activities to the changing conditions. But to be able to do this, social democracy must have a strong and compact organization, to be precise, a party organization that is united not only in name, but also in its fundamental principles and tactical views. Our task is to work to create this strong party that is armed with firm principles and impenetrable secrecy. The Social Democratic Party must take advantage of the new street movement that has commenced. It must take the banner of Russian democracy into its own hands and lead it to the victory that all desire. Thus, there are opening up before us a period of primarily political struggle. Such a struggle is inevitable for us because under present political conditions, the economic struggle, strikes, cannot produce substantial results. Even in free countries, the strike is a two-edged sword. Even there, although the workers possess the means of fighting political freedom, strongly organized labor unions, and large funds, strikes often end in the defeat of the workers. In our country, however, where strikes are a crime punishable by arrest and are suppressed by armed force, where all labor unions are prohibited, strikes acquire the significance only of a protest. For the purpose of protest, however, demonstrations are far more powerful weapons. In strikes, the forces of the workers are dispersed. The workers of only one factory or of a few factories, and at best of one trade, take part. The organization of a general strike is a very difficult matter, even in Western Europe, but in our country it is quite impossible. In street demonstrations, however, the workers unite their forces at once. All this shows what a narrow view is taken by those social democrats who want to confine the labor movement to the economic struggle and industrial organization, to leave the political struggle to the intelligentsia, to the students, to society, and assign the workers only the role of an auxiliary force. History teaches that under such circumstances, the workers will merely pull the chestnuts out of the fire for the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie, as a rule, gladly utilize the muscular arms of the workers in the struggle against autocratic government. And when victory has been achieved, they reap its fruits and leave the workers empty-handed. If this happens in our country, the workers will gain nothing from this struggle. As regards the students and other dissidents among the public, they, after all, also belong to the bourgeoisie. It will be sufficient to give them a harmless, plucked constitution that grants the people only the most insignificant rights. For all these dissidents to sing a different song, they will begin to extol the, quote, new, end quote, regime. The bourgeoisie live in constant dread of the red specter of communism. And in all revolutions, they try to put a stop to things when they are only just beginning. After receiving a tiny concession in their favor, they, terrified by the workers, stretch out a hand of conciliation to the government and shamelessly betray the cause of freedom. The working class alone is a reliable bulwark of genuine democracy. It alone finds it impossible to compromise with the autocracy for the sake of a concession, and it will not allow itself to be lulled by sweet songs sung to the accompaniment of the constitutional lute. Hence the question as to whether the working class will succeed in taking the lead in general democratic movement, or whether it will drag at the tail of the movement in the capacity of an auxiliary force of the intelligentsia, i.e., the bourgeoisie, is an extremely important one for the cause of democracy in Russia. In the former case, the overthrow of the autocracy will result in a broad democratic constitution. which will grant equal rights to the workers, to the downtrodden peasantry, and to the capitalists. In the later case, we shall have that, quote, plucked constitution, which will be able no less than absolutism to trample upon the demands of the workers and will grant the people the mere shadow of freedom. But in order to be able to play this leading role, the working class must organize in an independent political party. If it does that, no betrayal or treachery on the part of its temporary allies, society, will have any terrors for it in the struggle against absolutism. The moment this society betrays the cause of democracy, the working class itself will lead that cause forward by its own efforts. The independent political party will give it necessary strength to do so. Okay. Yeah, so there we have it. That's Stalin with the Russian Social Democratic Party and its immediate task. November to December 1901. Thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, Medium, Marxist. Hit me up there. Message me. Follow me. Like my page. Y'all have a great day. Dodada Goi.